soft tissue injuries by comparison to basically what we're talking about, lifestyle diseases and things that will basically kill us earlier, to be so blunt, is something, it's literally the magic pill. And it has some side effects, and most of those side effects are really good. Just some of them occasionally, I'll get a sore knee, I'll get a sore shoulder. I'll take that any day over dying 20 years early of a cancer I could have prevented.
You always make a heap of sense, so it's always good to have you on the panel. Kia ora. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
That is Richard Biddy, Exercise NZ. So, yes, okay, I will take the stairs. In fact, it's going down, so that's not... I'll take the stairs going up for Power Battle Friday. How about that?
Come and join me for pool Pilates.
Perhaps, Ella, perhaps. Hey, good to have you both on. Dr. Henry, Connor and English, thank you very much. I'm back tomorrow, of course, 3:45, Friday. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi au Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, the checkout chills. The cost of some basic food and groceries leaves shoppers cold. Checkpoint price checks 36 items for the fourth time in just over a year. So what has changed? We'll talk to a budget service about the consequences of buy now, pay later for meat and other essentials. A call for all political parties to promise around-the-clock security at hospital departments. A doctor tells us what it's like in the trenches in ED. Telco, One New Zealand, is number one for poor mobile customer service. The boss is live. And sad face emoji. Turns out those cutesy little icons could get you in a pile of wide-eyed smiling. You know what. You can watch us live on Freeview Channel 50.
Malolele. Good evening or good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Labour has been caught out claiming National would cut free public transport for disabled people, despite the Labour government never providing that support in the first place. It's the latest incorrect claim Labour has been spreading about what cuts National and ACT have planned for after the election. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
In May, Labour trumpeted the rollout of its half-price public transport, with documents noting total mobility users would be covered. It now admits that was not the case, but never issued a correction in the months since. The party exacerbated the misinformation in a release last week, claiming National would axe free public transport for disabled people. Mr Hipkins says he's asked his team to ensure all material published is entirely accurate.
Shoppers continue to feel the pinch at the checkout, last month paying around 12% more for their groceries compared to a year ago. Since May last year, Checkpoint has been tracking the price of 36 items in a family's trolley from a Countdown and Pack and Save in the same Auckland suburb. Louise Tanuth reports.
Since May last year, eggs have skyrocketed in price, with a dozen Countdown branded barn eggs rising from $5.50 to $9.80. At Pack and Save, a dozen barn eggs increased from $4.60 to $10.80. A 4kg box of Persil sensitive washing powder increased from $22 to $34 at Countdown. The good news is the price of cheese has finally dropped. It's now possible to get a 1kg block of Colby for around $10.
WorkSafe is arguing that charges shouldn't be dismissed against two booking agents accused in the Whakaari White Island trial. Lawyers for ID Tours and Tauranga Tourism Services made their submission in Auckland District Court yesterday relating to health and safety failings before the deadly eruption in 2019. Today, WorkSafe has responded, saying the tour agents had access to safety information but didn't pass it on to cruise passengers. But ID Tours lawyer David Noitzer says there was no evidence a person would have turned down the tour only by seeing the safety waiver. Young adults are taking on dangerous amounts of debt through buy now, pay later schemes. A new Auckland University of Technology survey shows almost 200,000 New Zealanders between the ages of 18 and 34 are in serious debt. Co-author Aisha Scott says unregulated delayed payment schemes like Afterpay, Lay-By and Zip enable the destructive behaviour.
Over 190,000 young Kiwis are likely to either be over-indebted or at least are at severe risk of it. Buy now, pay later had a really strong link to increased over-indebtedness.
A dog attack in the South Auckland suburb of Otara this morning has left 2 people injured. Auckland Council says the dogs are being kept at a local animal shelter while they investigate what happened. 28 people and 7 groups are being honoured for their actions in Napier during and after Cyclone Gabrielle. The Council's Civic Awards honour those involved in daring rescues, feeding and sheltering displaced people, and providing mental health support. Our reporter Kate Green is there.
Awards will go to people like Ricky Kihi, who helped rescue 50 people in Esk Valley by jet boat as floodwaters rose. Meanwhile, Nila has provided hundreds of meals daily since the cyclone, inspiring an army of volunteers to cook, pack and deliver. Mayor Kirsten Wise says the awards received close to 80 nominations. They'll be handed out in a ceremony at the Napier War Memorial Centre this evening.
And Bruce Springsteen has indefinitely postponed 8 tour dates this month with his E Street Band, citing medical treatment for peptic ulcers. The 73-year-old promised to reschedule the dates, all at US venues. In sport, former players are remembering the impact that Robin Broughton had on netball in New Zealand. Broughton died yesterday, aged 80, after a recent illness. She's best known as coach of the Southern Sting from 1998 to 2007, winning a record 7 titles in 10 years. Former Silver Fern and Sting player Donna Wilkins says Broughton was the driving force in that success.
Robbie was a very intelligent person, always challenging herself, whether it was through a book that she's read about some other sports coach and what they were doing, and she was always wanting to learn.
Netball New Zealand will pay tribute to Robin Broughton when the Silver Ferns host Australia in Invercargill next month. All Blacks coach Ian Foster says they'll wait until after this weekend's opening game against France before deciding on which player to call into the squad as a replacement for wing Emoni Narawa, who's been ruled out of the World Cup with a back injury. With several forwards carrying injuries, Foster says they could decide against bringing in another outside back.
We clearly have to make a change, and it could be there, it could be in the loosies. We're just looking at the progress of Brodie Retallick, Shannon Frizzell, the likes of those guys, and we'll assess that after this weekend.
And top seed Carlos Alcaraz is through to the tennis semi-finals at the US Open after beating Alexander Suarez in straight sets. Alcaraz will meet Daniel Medvedev in the final 4. That's the news.
National promises 10,000 EV charging sites and plans to scrap the clean car discount.
National wants to sit back and do nothing.
What we're not doing is subsidising wealthy people to purchase electric vehicles.
An amazing coincidence for a woman named Barbie Oppenheimer.
They'll say to you, "Is that really your name? You've got to be pulling my leg."
And the Rolling Stones are back.
Starting you up. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Showers clearing this afternoon, then mostly fine. However, a few areas of low cloud or fog early tomorrow. From Waitomo to Manawatu, also the central high country, mostly fine. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain clearing from Hawke's Bay by this evening and Gisborne overnight. Mainly fine tomorrow, but isolated showers developing from the afternoon. Horowhenua, Wellington, also Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly fine. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, isolated showers clearing to fine for most this afternoon, but a few showers lingering about Fiordland until early tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mostly fine also, and Forde, Kohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with showers this afternoon. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I will have traffic news and headlines for you at about 20 past 5.
Ngā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Some basic food and household items have shot up nearly 80% in the last 16 months. Checkpoint has been tracking the price of 36 items likely to be in a family's shopping trolley every week or so. Eggs have risen by the most from our supermarket shop, up 78% since May last year. And customers are feeling the pinch, saying they're having to go without some basic basics or switching from fresh to frozen. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
Budgeting for the weekly food shop has become a juggle for shoppers everywhere as the price of food continues to skyrocket.
We come here regularly. This has gone up, that's gone up. It's 40%, 50%.
Probably 10, 15%. Pretty much everything. It's all going up. But, you want to get paid more, it's going to cost more.
Everything. Everything's just gone up. A lot.
Since May last year, Checkpoint has been tracking 36 items likely to be on a family's weekly shopping list from a Countdown and Pack and Save in the same Auckland suburb. Today, there are some staggering results. Eggs are on the up and up. Since May last year, a dozen Countdown branded barn eggs shot up 78% from $5.50 to $9.80. Pack and Save's ones have seen a staggering 135% increase from $4.60 to $10.80.
It's looking at like $2 nearly an egg, where last year or the year before was, a tray was $7. Now it's like $13, $14. I think it's just gone up and up and up.
Soy milk or oat milk, their price went up quite a bit, and also eggs.
Maybe 20-30%. I think it go up quite a lot. Yeah.
You're still going to buy them though?
Still going to buy because, it's egg, it's an everyday product.
Other basic items that have seen a big increase are a 4 kg box of Persil sensitive washing powder. That's increased by 54% at Countdown from $22 to $34. To put things into perspective, for a humble family meal of mince with frozen peas and corn from Countdown, it cost $20 in May last year. Now it'll cost closer to $23, a 12% increase. Shoppers are feeling the pinch.
Poverty's just big here in Auckland. Like I just seen that guy out there, then, it's like everyday life now. Over the years, I've just seen it just, increase with people, just living day to day. And it doesn't matter what sort of job you're in, it's everybody.
As for fresh fruit and veggies, that's off the cards for some shoppers.
I think we don't buy it anymore, so it's just frozens now, just because it's so expensive. And I think the people that actually grow it don't actually get the money, it's the people that are selling it. So I think that's where it hurts the most,
Vegetables and fruit is expensive.
Yeah.
Bananas, everything's gone up.
It wasn't all bad news. In the dairy department, cheese and milk have both finally dropped. You can now get a 1 kg block of Colby for just under $10 at both stores, and 2 litres of standard milk has also dropped by about 20 cents to $3.70. Since May last year, our shop at Pack and Save has increased by 16%. That's an extra $34 at the checkout. Countdown was even higher at 22%. That's an extra $53. But we all need food, so some shoppers are finding ways to get creative or are having to swap things out.
Cheese, some meats,
We're just buying less compared to before. I didn't scratch off anything from the list, but I'm just buying less.
I'm trying to cut off my takeaway or maybe go out for dinner. So I'm trying to cook everything at home. So it's just that's the main thing I'm going to change.
I am looking at other brands more now and buying those as well. So overall you just got to watch your pennies.
And joining us now is Sandy Fage. Sandy is the manager of the Whanganui Budget Advisory Service. Kia ora, Sandy.
Hi.
I hear you've been in this job, more than 2 decades. So I'm wondering what you're seeing now compared to what you might have seen in past years.
So going on with what we've been talking about with the food insecurity, what we've seen in the past is people would come to see us because they were struggling to manage their finances. But now what we're seeing is it's not about managing the finances, it's about simply just not having enough money to cover the costs. And when it comes to food, most of the clients or people we see have already done the cutbacks. They've changed down to the brand products. They are not buying as much. But once you've done that, where do you go? And what we're seeing is that people are doing what we call like the downward spiral. They're racking up their credit cards to the extent where they can only pay the absolute minimum, which means they're going to be in that debt trap for a long time. Or they just miss payments on certain items. So it'll be things like 1 month the power bill doesn't get paid, the next month the internet bill doesn't get paid, the next month it's the credit card. So it's just a continual struggle and juggle, and it's not a happy juggle. It's a very stressful situation to be in. And also we're seeing people buying their meat using buy now, pay later. And you shouldn't have to do that. You know, to feed your family, to have to buy your food essentially on credit is something that we've never seen before.
Sandy, tell me a little bit more about that. What role is it playing, and what are the consequences of buying essentials on credit over a period of time?
So essentially it's that... So the example I can give you is a family who purchased $80 of meat on buy now, pay later, which means that they can make 4 fortnightly $20 payments, which they could afford. However, that $80 worth of meat isn't going to last them 2 months, so they have to go back and purchase another $80, probably in a couple of weeks' time. So then their payments are 20 plus 20. If you extrapolate that out, it gets to a stage where probably at that third purchase, they cannot afford the $60, so then they default. And the way the buy now, pay later works is there is no interest, and it is a really good platform if you can afford to use it correctly. But unfortunately, the people we're seeing can't. They turn to it, they use it, then they default. And as soon as you default, then you get charged the fees. And if you default and cannot catch up, then it gets usually passed to a debt collection company, which then impacts your credit report, which then impacts your ability to access rentals and utilities. So it's very much a slow downward progression if you get into that trap.
How are people surviving, and on what? Because you've told us that it's not about mismanagement of money, it's just that the money doesn't stretch as far as it needs to, right? So
That's right, yeah.
What are people actually surviving on?
Well, the Otago University Nutritional Department do a really good study into what is the expected expenditure for food. So, for example, like an adult male would probably need about $130 a week for food. We're lucky if we can get that for a whole family. So it depends on a person's or a family's situation, their financial situation. But what we are seeing across the board, and it's not just beneficiaries, it's from our superannuitants right the way through to our students. Everyone is having to say, I cut back last year, now I don't know what to do, now I'm missing payments. So they've cut back as best they can, but now it's impacting other areas of their life. They've gone to a situation where they're borrowing, they're doing buy now, pay later, or, they've tried all the easy quick fixes, and now we're getting people that just say, we don't know what to do. We haven't come to see you because we've been trying to be stoic and sort it out and do all the right things, but we've been doing all the right things and we're still not able to manage because prices are just going up. I mean, we talk about the food insecurity, and it means basically you have no security around food. So every day you're living in a very insecure, stressful environment, and that has flow-on impact to other areas of people's lives. And that's what we're seeing in our communities, increased mental stress, increased domestic violence, increased kids not being able to learn at school because of other things that are happening in their lives. So it's having a massive impact on different parts of our society.
Sandy, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That is Sandy Fage, who is the manager of the Whanganui Budget Advisory Service. Keen for your feedback on that one. The price of groceries, text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We know the prices have been high for a while now, and it's really starting to bite for some people. Let us know your thoughts. It is 16 minutes after 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A call tonight for security staff 24/7 at every hospital emergency department in the country in response to a growing number of violent incidents. The Australasian College for Emergency Medicine wants all political parties to promise ahead of the election that they will deliver. It says long waits for care are dangerous for everyone, with rising levels of aggression in EDs, and there needs to be appropriately trained security staff around the clock. An RNZ investigation in August showed staff at North Shore and Waitakere hospitals have called security or hit panic buttons thousands of times within a 7-month period due to violence violence and abuse by patients and visitors. Now, that included 529 so-called code greys, where staff called security via an internal emergency number. Guards also had to physically restrain people on 237 separate occasions during that time. Dr. Andrew Ewens is an emergency physician at North Shore Hospital, and he joins us now. Kia ora, Doctor.
Kia ora, Lisa.
First thing, most people would think that EDs do have security. Don't they all have security staff 24/7?
No, I don't think every ED does. Most EDs have security services that they can call on. Some are stationed actually inside the ED. But I think some of the smaller EDs wouldn't have security services directly available.
Okay. Hey, it's quite hard to hear you, so I might get you to just move around a little bit. And I'm wondering, please, if you could tell me about, well, how safe do you feel at work?
Well, generally, we have very good security assistance if we require it. The problem we have with EDs is that the busier they get, the more overcrowded they get, the harder they are to work in. So the overall environment becomes more stressful. And on top of that, there's if patients come in who can't get out, who need higher level of care, say in a mental health facility, then that kind of increases the intensity of the department overall. So when they are full, EDs become stressful anyway. And what we do see is that behaviour tends to escalate under those circumstances in particular. So we rely very heavily on our security services under those circumstances.
And what kind of behaviour do you see regularly that is challenging?
Well, it's a full spectrum of behaviours you might expect with people under stress and maybe disinhibited with alcohol or drugs. So those are the kind of behaviours you might expect. Generally verbal, but occasionally physical, and there can also be some outright violent behaviour in the emergency department, including damage done to the facilities and assault on staff and occasionally other patients as well.
Have you been abused while you've been at work?
Yeah, well, physical abuse is relatively uncommon. Verbal is reasonably common, but in the context of someone who's having acute behavioural disturbance, it's kind of part of the job. So, we're used to it in some ways, and there are escalations and de-escalation strategies and things that are in place. But I think most people who work in the acute care environment would have instances where they were at least verbally abused, if not physically.
So the college, Australasian College for Emergency Medicine, is saying that wait times are adding to this, right? The longer that people have to wait, the higher the tension gets. And that there's a lack of properly staffed care facilities and beds to move people on. So do you need security, or do you need someone to fix those other problems?
Well, EDs don't work in isolation, so we require the system to be functional around us. So EDs only get really blocked if that's what causes us troubles, when we can't get our patients through the emergency department to the inpatient facility. That's our biggest concern. It's been, that's when EDs become really dysfunctional. So that's the key aspect. Business as usual would still require us to have security available, but if we can't get our patients through the system, then that increases the overall requirement of security, does heighten the tension overall, and also it means that we've got people in the emergency departments who probably shouldn't be there and should really be in a care facility designed which is not high stimulus, not lights on 24 hours, and not necessarily with someone who can't provide them, minute-by-minute supervision.
What do you think of the fact that this is one of your principal wishes on your wish list for the election is security staff 24/7 at every emergency department? Well, it's kind of a bit sad, really, isn't it?
Well, I think the college is looking at the future of emergency care in general, and this is just one item that's an immediate fix that's required. So we've gone through a phase where we used to have a national target to get people through the department, which was evidence-based, and we know it's good for patients. And as the system gets more and more compressed and we are unable to get our patients through, then the nature of our work changes. So I think this is a bit of a workaround to the fact that the systemic problem is we can't get our patients through the departments properly.
Thank you for your time. That is Dr. Andrew Ewens, who's an emergency physician at North Shore Hospital. 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know your thoughts on the price of groceries and how that is affecting your household. Also, heard a call there for emergency physicians. They want 24/7 security at hospital EDs and are asking political parties to pledge their support for that policy ahead of the election. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ko iwi anō tēnei.
A budget advisor has told Checkpoint that the cost of living crisis is sending people into debt as they juggle the rising cost of basic items. Sandy Fage, manager of the Whanganui Budget Advisory Service, says families are even buying meat on credit. A review by RNZ's Checkpoint of supermarkets in one Auckland suburb shows the price of 36 basic grocery items has risen by around 12% in a year. Politicians are being urged to give every emergency department in the country around-the-clock security staff. National Party leader Christopher Luxon backs the call from the Australasian College for Emergency Medicine. But Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says he's not sure if the security measures are necessary everywhere. The Salvation Army says a promise by Labour, National and the Greens to build 1,000 state homes in Auckland if in power after the election is heartening, but not enough. Social Housing National Director Greg Foster says the number is a drop in the bucket. WorkSafe is challenging the move to dismiss charges against 2 booking agents in the Whakaari White Island health and safety trial. WorkSafe says ID Tours and Tauranga Tourism Services didn't pass on safety information to cruise ship passengers ahead of the 2019 eruption that killed 22 people. But lawyers for the firms say there's no evidence the documents would have changed anyone's mind about visiting the volcano. And tomorrow marks a year since the death of the Queen. The Prince and Princess of Wales will lead tributes, although the details are yet to be revealed. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, a crash just north of Taupo on State Highway 1 near the Ohakuri area has closed the highway in both directions between Tutuko and Tram roads. You're advised to delay your journey through there. And in Hawke's Bay, an incident has closed State Highway 2 near Otane, south of the intersection with Argyle Road. Our next traffic news and headlines is at about 20 to 6.
Thank you, Evie. The All Blacks coach Ian Foster insists he's picked a side that has the firepower to beat France on Saturday morning's Rugby World Cup opener in Paris. Foster has made 4 changes to his starting 15 from the one that suffered a record loss at the hands of South Africa at Twickenham almost a fortnight ago. RNZ rugby reporter Joe Porter joins us now. Hi, Joe. So the All Blacks have had some injury woes. How's that going to affect their chances against France?
Yeah, well, this certainly won't help things. Jordie Barrett, who's been a regular in their midfield this season and has been playing fairly well alongside Rico Ioane. That combination has developed nicely. He's been ruled out. So Anton Leonard-Brown, who hasn't played a whole heap of rugby this year, missing a large chunk of the Super Rugby season due to injury. He's only played 3 tests this year, only started it in 1. So he comes in a little bit underdone, you might think. He's very experienced, of course, but I think the All Blacks would have liked David Harvidi to be available. Unfortunately for David, he's come back from his injury a little bit too late, and I don't think the coaches had enough faith in him that he could go through the full 80 at this point. So, look, yeah, a few struggles for the All Blacks. They've had to bring in Dalton Papali'i at blindside flanker. He's taken over from Luke Jacobson. They've pushed him to the bench. They've gone for essentially 2 open sides within their starting 15. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out against a very big physical French pack, or perhaps an indication they'll try and run the big French forwards around a bit. And of course, Cody Taylor, he's back starting at hooker, and Tyrell Lomax, that big gash on his leg, has seen him ruled out. He's been replaced by Nepal Alala. So the team largely the same to the one that lost to the Box, with a few injury-enforced changes. Jordie Barrett probably the most notable of those at this point.
So, has Ian Foster got his combinations right here?
Well, he seems to think so, and to be honest, he's been a little bit hamstrung by his squad and not having any more loose forwards available to him, or more locks. He's got injured locks, injured loose forwards, and of course, you can't bring anyone in without replacing them, and he's chosen to keep those injured guys in the squad. So he really didn't have a lot of choice in some of his selections. This team is a team that largely went through the Rugby Championship playing pretty good rugby. They were unbeaten through the Rugby Championship, were very impressive. They were sort of everyone's favourites to win the World Cup. And then, of course, they had that blip on the road, or it was more like a big, large pothole when they came up against the Springboks a couple of weeks ago. Ian Foster has been telling people not to read too much into that result. He seems to think they've got some quiet confidence heading into this game against France, but it's going to be a tough ask against the hosts, who are going to be buoyed by 80-odd thousand fans at Stade de France, a ground they've only lost one game in the last 4 years.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a fortress for France, right? So what kind of atmosphere are the All Blacks going to encounter there on Saturday morning?
Yeah, well, it'll be as hostile as any, I suppose, but it might not necessarily be as out and out booing as you might expect at some of the other places. It's going to be a real party atmosphere. The French are very good at putting on a show, an event. They celebrate their players, even the ground announcements, the player announcements, everything is sort of the highest theatre. So it'll be very loud. It'll be a lot of singing, a lot of noise from the crowd, and the All Blacks will really need to start fast this weekend, because if they don't, that crowd's going to get up. The French will get their tails up. The crowd will get louder. The All Blacks will find it more difficult. So if the All Blacks can start fast and put a few tries on the French quickly, it might take the crowd out of it somewhat and help nullify that home advantage.
Thank you, Joe. That is Joe Porter, RNZ rugby reporter. Crowned the worst one, telecommunications company One NZ, formerly Vodafone, has topped the Commerce Commission's rankings for poor cell phone customer service. The watchdog has released its first dashboard based on a survey of 2,400 consumers. The results show One New Zealand has the most customers with service issues. They are the least likely to recommend their provider to others, and they have the lowest levels of satisfaction with the time it takes to resolve their complaints. Oh, and One also got the lowest ranking for staff knowledge and helpfulness. So bottom on all measures for mobile customer service. Well, joining us now is One NZ CEO Jason Paris. Kia ora, Jason.
Kia ora, Lisa.
Embarrassing?
Oh, it's never good to be in the headlines for negative customer service, that's for sure.
So have you got bad customer service?
We don't think so. It's what the Commerce Commission has released is certainly not reflective of our own numbers, and not reflective of the conversations that I have with our customers and what I see from our team every day. But
it's an independent survey, right? So I suppose that's what matters. 2,400 customers, and they ranked you poorly on every measure for residential mobile rankings. So only 8% would recommend you to friends. Why do you think that is?
As I said, it's not what I see. Actually, our customer numbers are pretty good, to be honest, Lisa. However, not where they need to be. 2,500 customers. That's a lot of New Zealanders to have a conversation with. What I would say though is that it's a kind of a 6-month rolling survey, so it's a bit like looking at how National and Labour polled in January and then February and March, and saying it's reflective of how they're performing now. What I would say is that we are getting better. But I would say we're only 60 to 80% of where we need to be. So I'm not suggesting that that we're picking up the phone as fast as we should, or answering our customers' calls right first time in the number as well as we should. But we're much better than we have been, and I'm hearing that from our customers, and I'm seeing that in our own numbers.
Okay, well, it is a line in the sand at a certain point in time, and you can measure yourself against it with the next 6 months, right? So in that way, it is good comparative data. So I'm wondering, in terms of worst satisfaction rates for complaint resolution, why?
Well, our numbers internally would say that 80% of the time our customers contact us, we fix it first time, which is a very different number to what's been published. However, our own numbers would suggest that means 20% of the time New Zealanders aren't being helped first time, and that's not good enough. And that's our biggest focus. The other issue you need to look at is we don't want people calling us in the first place. So it costs us money to if customers want to call us or come onto a retail store from a service perspective. So I can tell you, no one wakes up every morning going, how can I create a service issue for a customer every day? In fact, it's the complete opposite.
You seem to be rebutting all of this by suggesting what? Are you suggesting that these results are bogus?
I don't think they're reflective of our own numbers, Lisa. But look,
it's the Commerce Commission, an independent survey, 2,400 customers, ranking people with 5% share of the market or more. Is arrogance the problem here?
No, not at all. Like, I send an email out to our customers about 3 or 4 times a year. I sent one out yesterday. I would have talked about that. In the next 48 hours, I would have talked to about 2,000 customers myself personally via email. So it's a pretty decent sample size. And what I would say is that the NPS scores that the Commerce Commission use are not the numbers that we use internally to track our own service results. So we look at things like...
But does that matter? These are different. These might be different markers. They're markers nonetheless, and you feature at the bottom of every marker for the residential mobile rankings service. Let's talk a specific example. What's your call centre pickup time?
About 60 seconds on average.
Right, and what's your time for resolution of a complaint?
80% of calls that we answer get resolved first time.
Yes, but first time is, well, how long? Is that they call once and then they have to wait 2 or 3 days, or what's the duration?
It'll depend on the issue. So, for example, if we're relying on Chorus to fix a fibre outage, we might have to rely on a third party's, time to schedule to fix that. If it's something that's more simple, where it's a change in plan or a billing inquiry, then it'll be fixed in a matter of minutes.
So the Commerce Commission would like you to display your rankings in a place where your customers can see them. So you're going to undertake to put them in your centres, shops?
Oh, I don't really understand the point of it. Like, the reality is...
So they can see what kind of service they can expect from you and make an informed decision based on independent analysis.
Well, our customers see that from us every day, so...
So that's a no? Not going to do it?
Well, I think our focus needs to be on, as you said, answering the calls quickly, fixing them first time. I just don't understand, why would publish a customer service numbers that are not really reflective of what we focus on in the organisation on our front retail store windows.
Appreciate your time, Jason. That is Jason Paris, who is One NZ's CEO there, ranked the most poorly, lowest on all the ranking criteria for residential mobile rankings, according to the Commerce Commission. It is 26 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier, who joins me in the studio. Nona, we're continuing the theme, talking business, and we're starting off with this transport software company, right? A takeover target, E-Road. It's raising money. How much are they raising?
They're going to raise $50 million. So they have been the subject of a takeover offer, but the company thought it undervalued them, and it was a non-binding offer, so it's just sitting on the table. It was an offer of $150 million, and it's nothing's happening with that. So the company's moving ahead. Yes, they're going to raise $50 million. That's going to clear up their balance sheet, give them the room that they need to grow. They reckon they have about $60 million available for growth. They're going to focus on the North American market. And so for E-Road, they're in a trading halt right now. They're going to offer shares they're going to offer one new share at 70 cents each, which is for every 2.06 shares currently held by shareholders. And the whole offer is fully underwritten. So come Monday, we can expect E-Road to be trading again.
Let's talk about Asian leaders meeting with China's slow-growing economy, topping the list. Well, it's a slowing economy.
It's really slowing. Really slowing. So this is the ASEAN meeting going on in Indonesia. The largest economies in the world, they're China, Japan, South Korea, not counting the United States, of course. China's growth is looking maybe... What are they saying? Maybe they'll struggle to meet their 5% growth target. And that spells really bad news for everybody who does trade with them, because if their economy is shrinking, that means if that's your export partner, which of course China is for New Zealand, that's not good news. That's one of the big concerns. And how that shakes out, we don't know. But overall, the Chinese economy is a concern for this region. Definitely. It's been the driver of our economic growth for many, many years, and now it's going to really struggle.
Sluggish is an understatement. Okay, Nona, talk us through the markets, please, and the dollar.
Okay, so the top 50 index, it fell 1 point, like not quite 1 point, to 11,427, and it was a sea of red. I mean it, like Everything was red. The New Zealand dollar also really struggling, 58.7 US cents, but it's fairly steady against the Australian, still at 92.1. I keep kind of ticking my screen to make sure it's moving.
It's still alive.
It's still there. And 49.96 pence, so just under that 50 mark.
Wow.
Now,
that's a bounce
did
back.
I say?
You said 49.
I said 46. No, it's 47.
No. Well, you inflated it. Okay, so what's the real number, Nona? Give it to us.
46.96. Okay. So that's almost 47, excuse me. I don't know why I got onto 50. It's just from before, I think. Anyhow, I just want to say, though, that the U.S., there's some inflation data which shows there's still a lot of heat in that market, which is making the market think that the U.S. Federal Reserve is going to have to hike interest rates again, and that's why our dollar is weak.
Thank you so much, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business News there. The Labour Party was on the back foot on today's campaign trail, batting away another bad poll and broken promise. The Post Freshwater Strategy poll has support for the left bloc well behind the right, though it's not exactly smooth sailing for National either. Our political reporter Annika Smith filed this story.
National Party leader Chris Luxon making waves on Lake Wakatipu.
When you think about like the jet, the Hamilton jet was the starting of a jet boat, and actually many parts of the world you don't see a jet boat.
Rolling up in Queenstown to announce his party's plan for the tourism sector, an 11th Great Walk.
We have seen how economically transformative the Great Walks have been to local towns across the country, and so we will create a new 80-kilometre Great Walk at Waiatoa, Molesworth and Canterbury.
And changes to the migrant worker visa, including raising the upper age limit of the working holiday visa from 30 to 35 and scrapping the median wage. Mr Luxon hoping the changes draw tens of thousands more migrant workers to New Zealand, and adamant lower wages won't mean more exploitation.
No, not at all. The same rules apply, but what's actually happening is that's a barrier for actually tourism businesses being able to actually hire staff and actually attract good staff. And so what we need to be able to do is pay and make sure that this is a sector that needs to pay for the skills and experience that it's got.
The policy, creating a potentially bigger and cheaper labour pool, will resonate with local tourism and hospitality businesses who've long flagged worker shortages. Up in Hamilton, Labour leader Chris Hipkins was catching up on the council's community safety initiatives, co-funded with central government, backing his party's track record on law and order and promising to go further by adding another 300 police officers to the front line over 4 years if elected in October.
Extra police on the beat will be good for New Zealand.
Today brought another poll with another bad result for Labour. The Post Freshwater Strategy debut poll interviewed 1,500 eligible voters between the 28th and 30th of August, the final sitting week of the term, with a 3% margin of error. It has support for Labour a dismal 26% and National and ACT on the numbers for exactly 60 seats. This scenario would mean National could lead the next government on the capital P proviso. It could strike a deal with New Zealand First. Chris Luxon not wanting to think about Winston Peters.
No, what I'm focused on is the National Party. I'm not thinking about any other political party.
And Chris Hipkins not wanting to think about another bad poll result.
That poll was taken a few weeks ago before the campaign had even launched. Campaign's just getting underway. A poll is a poll, and nobody's voted yet.
The Post Freshwater poll, while new, does fit in a downward trend of support for Labour. And late this afternoon, that was reinforced by Labour's own pollsters with a poll for its corporate clients. It shows Labour's support falling to 30% and National on 36%. Chris Hipkins has taken a slide in the preferred Prime Minister ratings to 28%, with Chris Luxon only just behind on 26%. The result certainly not helped by the Labour Party having to continually front missteps, today admitting it mistakenly promised disabled public transport users half-price fares out of the budget.
I do understand that in the communication of that, some of that communication has been mixed up, and so I've made sure that the team are going back to correct that.
Another unwanted correction for Labour that will likely punish, not promote the party in the next poll.
It is 19 minutes to 6 and you're at Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro, do keep your feedback coming. Lots of it coming in on violence and EDs and food prices too. Interested in your thoughts on service from mobile companies, telcos. Do get in touch via 2101. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time for the headlines now. Anea Evi, mina pitspitsa kōrero.
A budgeting advisor says people are struggling to pay for a food shop every week and falling into debt traps to cover costs. Some basic food and household items have shot up nearly 80% in the last 16 months. Whanganui Budget Advisory Services, Sandy Fage, told Checkpoint people are racking up credit card debt and using buy now, pay later schemes. An industry consortium has today met in Wellington to discuss launching green hydrogen in the aviation sector. Green hydrogen is made using renewable sources of power such as wind energy. Airbus, which was on the panel alongside Air New Zealand and Christchurch Airport, says New Zealand is an ideal place for hydrogen aviation. Nurse shortages are being blamed for a decision to close Christchurch's 24-hour surgery overnight in 2 weeks' time. There's no date for when the nighttime service will resume after September the 21st. Pegasus Health says the Madras Street Clinic will close to patients each evening from 10 p.m. until 8 o'clock in the morning. Russia says it's shot down several Ukrainian drones, including one reportedly close to Moscow. It comes as the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, continues a 2-day visit to Kyiv, where he's announced a further package of aid worth more than $1 billion. It includes controversial tank shells made with depleted uranium. And Apple shares have taken a tumble after China reportedly told central government officials not to use iPhones and other foreign devices. The Chinese government is worried that smartphones could be used for spying, a concern shared by Washington. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic. In Auckland on the southern motorway, a breakdown on State Highway 1 is blocking the left southbound lane after Simon Street overbridge. A crash just north of Taupo on State Highway 1 near the Ohakuri area has closed the highway in both directions between Tutukau and Tram Roads. You're advised to avoid the area. And in Hawke's Bay, an incident has closed State Highway 2 near Otane, south of the intersection with Argyle Road. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Lots of your feedback coming in, particularly about food prices. This listener says, I earn over 100k annually for a family of 5, and we visit the food bank almost every week. Another listener says an option that might be helpful is to mix legumes in with your meat meals to make groceries cheaper. Add lentils to your mince and chickpeas to your chicken. Your meat meals will last twice as long. That is a helpful tip. Thank you. This person says the cost of food is a total and utter disgrace. Let's not pretend this is anything other than profits before people. We need to change this capitalist model we are following because it doesn't work for 80% of us. Anna and Nelson's got in touch to say eat vegetarian and buy all your vegetables at local markets. We do, and easily feed 2 adults with really healthy food for a maximum of $120 a week. Another listener says, thank heavens for the government's free school lunches. At least our tamariki are being fed. It is a massive help for family budgets. A listener from Lower Hutt's got in touch to say, newsflash, meat is not an essential. Yours, vegetarian listener of Lower Hutt. Yep, and lots of people will agree with that, but I'm just wondering more on principle. Should meat be unaffordable in a country that is a farming nation? And I think that might be the issue for a few people. Text us on 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ if you'd like to add your thoughts to the conversation. Wellington hospital staff are worried a new parking plan will endanger the safety of shift workers and see patients unfairly fined. The City Council wants to limit more than 2,000 parking spaces in Newtown and Berhampore to 2 hours with an exemption for residents with a permit. Jemima Houston reports.
Wellington Hospital nurse Hilary Gardner says she's scared to walk more than 10 minutes to her car in the dark after work. She says the hospital is so understaffed that her shifts are often extended to the early hours of the morning.
I don't like walking through Newtown in the dark at 3 o'clock in the morning to my car. I will walk with my keys poking out of my fingers just in case.
Wellington City Council has admitted up to 1,200 hospital workers who park in Newtown could be impacted. City Design Manager Vida Cristela says there will be more time-limited parks near the hospital so patients can get to appointments. She says it will also free up more spaces for residents.
We will still have enough space within a 10-minute walking distance from the hospital for those staff to continue to park. They'll just have to walk a bit further.
Vida Cristela says 80% of hospital staff work 9 to 5, but Hilary Gardner says the plan ignores shift workers and their safety.
You're talking about a young female workforce who are working shifts that finish any time after 7 p.m. at night, and you're asking them to walk further than 10 minutes in darkness when we know there have been assaults on staff leaving hospitals.
The Nurses Union delegate says the limited on-site staff parking, which costs around $100 a month, is expensive, and many people rely on the free parking in Newtown. She says it's poor timing for the council to introduce restrictions that will make life harder for shift workers providing critical care to patients.
If we can't protect our staff, we're going to lose more staff, and we're already in a staffing crisis.
Another hospital worker, Debbie, arrives to her day shifts in Newtown from her home on the Kapiti coast. But she already has to park 1 to 2 kilometres walk away from the hospital.
That's fine if you are 100% or it's not pouring with rain, or if you're carrying supermarket shopping back to your car with you.
Her colleague Angie is worried the parking plan will make access worse for patients rather than improve it. She says staff are so overworked that outpatient appointments never run to time.
I think those people that already find it hard to access health services are going to be really affected if they're then getting a fine on top for parking overtime for circumstances outside of their control.
Te Whatu Ora says it is still looking at the possible impact of the parking plan on hospital patients and staff. The council's proposal will be out for public consultation on the 12th of September.
And it is 12 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. In the UK, there's a nationwide manhunt for a former soldier suspected of terror offences who escaped from prison. Daniel Khalif was awaiting trial at Wandsworth Prison in London after being accused of leaving fake bombs at a military base. He escaped by strapping himself to the bottom of a delivery van. The BBC's Daniel Sanford has the story.
The austere facade of Wandsworth Prison tonight, the jail at the centre of one of the most embarrassing escapes since the 1990s, after a former soldier facing serious charges of threats to the state broke out by simply hitching a ride underneath a food delivery van. He is 21-year-old Daniel Khalif, who is accused of a bomb hoax and of collecting information for a hostile state. This morning he was working in the kitchen at Wandsworth Prison when at 07:50 he escaped through the main gate by hanging onto the underside of a food delivery van. A nationwide manhunt began immediately, but at 15:30 counter-terrorism detectives decided they needed to go public, appealing for help in tracking him down.
He was, at the time of his escape, wearing red and white check trousers, a white t-shirt and brown boots. He's a 6'2" male who's very slim build but with dark brown hair. So we just appeal to the public to look out for him and call us on 999 if there's any sightings of him.
Daniel Khalif joined the army in 2019 and in 2022 he became the focus of a counter-terrorism investigation. He's accused of being involved in a bomb hoax on the 2nd of January this year, and on the 26th of January he was arrested. The charges he faces include preparing an act of terrorism and collecting information useful to an enemy believed to be a hostile state.
This is a very serious breach of security, and it throws up a number of questions. I mean, firstly, what was this man doing in Wandsworth Prison? Wandsworth is a Category B reception and resettlement prison, so it's not an obvious place for somebody who's been charged under terrorism offences who is a potential national security risk.
Counter-terrorism detectives here at Scotland Yard are keen to stress that they don't believe that Daniel Khalif poses a particular threat to the public. The charges he faced didn't relate to something like a knife attack or a bomb attack, but they are advising people that if they see Khalif, they shouldn't approach him, rather they should dial 999. Nonetheless, the public were affected by the all ports and airports alert, which led to extra checks. This in turn led to huge queues building up at airports, including Stansted, Gatwick, Heathrow, Manchester and Glasgow. Wandsworth was at the centre of one of the most famous prison breakouts when the great train robber Ronnie Biggs scaled the wall with a rope ladder in 1965 and started a new life in Rio de Janeiro. 1994 saw the last escape by inmates linked to terrorism when IRA members broke out of Whitemoor prison.
How many times a day would you fire one off? Cute, sometimes sassy little icons that have become an online language of their own. Emojis, everything from a heart or a thumbs up to a smiling poo. But it seems they could have much bigger legal implications. So when can an emoji constitute a threat or harassment or seal a legally binding deal? Marilyn McMahon is a Professor of Law at Australia's Deakin University and joins us now. Hi, Professor.
Hi.
Did you ever imagine you would be analysing the legal implications of emojis?
Perhaps not, but then I think perhaps it's not surprising because the law has to address and deal with contemporary developments, and emoji, as part of modern communication, are ubiquitous.
So, where is the line? What can get you in trouble with them and why?
Well, I think that perhaps people forget that online communications can convey threats and intimidation and harassment just as interpersonal comments and statements can do those things. So there's no immunity just by making a post to someone's Facebook page saying, that you're going to kill them or leave a bomb in their house. There's no real protection for that compared to, say, doing it in, real life face-to-face. And so when people do those things online, now they wear consequences. They may get charged with criminal offences for that conduct.
Can you give me some examples where emojis have got people in strife? I mean, an example where one might have been considered harassment?
Yeah, look, often they occur in conjunction with actual statements or text messages. So it's rare that emoji by themselves are sufficient to constitute a threat. And there's a New Zealand case that I can refer to of 2017 where a man had separated from his partner and they had a poor relationship. She'd taken out an intervention order against him and he sent or put on her Facebook page a message that said, "You're going to get it," accompanied by a plain emoji. So the threat is there in the text. The court that considered the matter actually decided that the plain emoji added or compounded the threat because in those circumstances they lived on different islands and the plain really signified how he was going to get to her. So it wasn't that the emoji itself was the threatening thing. It added to the text that was threatening, and the court found him liable for breaching the order to protect her.
So does this mean that courts generally have in essence accepted that emoji are a language that has universal meaning?
I don't know about the universal meaning because one of the problems with emoji is interpreting their meaning in a particular context. But I certainly think that courts are very willing to say that the presence of emoji can amplify a threat or wrongdoing, and they're a bit reluctant to accept the just joking defence. We've got several instances where there's been a history of domestic violence by a man towards his partner, and then there's been a post online. For example, in the United States, in one case, a man who'd had a history of domestic violence towards his wife posted a message to his son that on Halloween he should have a costume with his wife's head on a stick. And she subsequently went to the police and said that constituted a threat towards her. And his defence was, "I was just joking. It was a silly comment." And in the context of the preceding history of violence, that wasn't accepted by the court.
So that's violence and harassment and threats. But also, the thumbs up has been taken as agreement for basically a binding contract, hasn't it, in one case?
Yeah, we have now two cases. One, I think, has attracted a lot of attention recently. That's the Canadian case, where you had a farmer who'd offered grain for sale and then a buyer had made an offer and the farmer had responded with a thumbs up emoji. Now, the farmer subsequently did not want to go ahead with the sale because prices had increased subsequently and he thought he could do better. So he tried to avoid the sale, saying that the thumbs up emoji really wasn't the finishing of the contract. And the Canadian judge didn't accept that. He actually held that the thumbs up emoji given after the exchange of contract details constituted the making of a valid contract, and the farmer had to pay up on it. There was a preceding case in Israel in 2017 between a landlord and a prospective tenant, where the tenant indicated through a series of emojis, very positive, laughing, clapping, girls dancing, champagne corks. It looked like the prospective tenant, had accepted the landlord's offer of a contract, and then they defaulted. They just simply withdrew. The Israeli court in those circumstances said the exchange of messages, which again involved text as well as emoji, but the general tenor conveyed by the emoji as well as the text was very positive, that the prospective tenant was accepting the agreement with the landlord and found for the landlord and awarded damages against the prospective tenant who behaved badly.
In that case, when emoji can get you into a contract and various other strife, what advice do you give to people?
Well, I think I'd say to people, be careful about thinking that doing something like giving a thumbs up emoji after you've been negotiating with a tradesperson, for example. You might have agreed on a price, or the tradesperson might have nominated a price to you, and if you sent back a thumbs up emoji, then potentially that might be the a valid contract you just entered into. So I think we should be accepting that emoji can have meaning and can, for example, in context be interpreted perhaps as signifying, in those circumstances, entering into a valid contract.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you for your time. That is Professor Marilyn McMahon, who is a Professor of Law at Australia's Deakin University. Do get in touch. Has emojis got you in trouble? 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Have you entered into a contract with a thumbs up? Ooh, careful, Evie. No more thumbs up emojis. Let's get to some of your feedback before the news at 6. A lot of it coming in. On One New Zealand, the telco company who got the worst rankings in terms of customer service for mobile phone services. This person says, I'm a business customer of One NZ and have had a parody of bad service experiences over the past 6 months. In my books, the Commerce Commission rated them too high. I would be happy to provide gory details. Another person says, One is the worst ever, gave up on the company, data gone to the dogs in rural areas. Another says, wow, talk about out of touch. I switched from Vodafone nearly 2 years ago to 2 Degrees with my wife and 2 teens, never going back. They sent a smiley emoji. Don't worry, it's not a contract, just a comment. Someone else, though, has said here, I'm going right down to the bottom of the list, who says they really like One and don't intend to change.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Maloilele, I'm Evie Ashton. Labour has been caught out claiming National would cut free public transport for disabled people, despite the Labour government never providing that support in the first place. Budget documents published in May wrongly said that total mobility users would get half-price bus and train fares when that was not the case. Labour has since published an ad on social media exacerbating the misinformation, claiming National would axe that assistance. Mr Hipkins says he's asked his team to ensure all material published is entirely accurate.
There's plenty in the National Party's policies to attack that is actually what they are proposing. So I've made it very clear that I want to make sure that that is what we are focused on.
The misstep comes after several Labour MPs made incorrect statements about what National and ACT have planned for after the election. A budgeting advisor says people are struggling to pay for a food shop every week and are falling into debt traps to cover costs. Some basic food and household items have shot up nearly 80% in the last 16 months, and a Checkpoint price check of 36 items at 2 supermarkets shows a 12% rise in the last year. Whanganui Budget Advisory Services Sandy Fage told Checkpoint people simply don't have enough money to buy the basics. She says people are racking up credit card debt and using buy now pay later schemes to deal with the high cost of living. WorkSafe is arguing charges should not be dismissed against 2 booking agents accused in the Whakaari White Island trial. Lawyers for ID Tours and Tauranga Tourism Services made their submission in Auckland District Court yesterday relating to health and safety failings before the deadly eruption in 2019. Hais Almeida reports.
WorkSafe says the tour agents failed to do the bare minimum to inform customers about the risks of visiting the volcanic island. Prosecutor Steve Simon says the tour agents had access to safety information but did not pass it to cruise passengers. He says the documents could have changed people's mind on whether to go on the trip. But ID Tours lawyer David Neutzer says there was no evidence a person would have turned down the tour only by seeing the safety waiver. Judge Evangelist Thomas will give his decision on Tuesday.
Christchurch's 24-hour surgery will be closing overnight in 2 weeks' time, with no indication of when the nighttime service will resume. Nurse shortages are to blame. Pegasus Health says the Madras Street Clinic will close to patients each evening from 10 p.m. until 8 o'clock in the morning from September the 21st. A telco user group believes the Commerce Commission's new report may encourage people to shop around for new mobile and broadband providers. It shows consumer frustration with major providers, none of which are performing well. Craig Young from the Tech Users Association says many people aren't reviewing their current plans.
We know the New Zealand market's sticky, so we think that information like this that consumers can look at when they're looking at price as well will help them think about, well, maybe it's time for me to think about moving and getting a better deal somewhere else.
Craig Young says it should be easier and clearer for customers to compare like for like when considering telcos. Sonning Car Park in Hamilton will now be called Opoia Pā, following a vote by Hamilton City Council today. The vote is the latest development for the site, which became controversial earlier this year when high-rise housing was proposed on the council-owned land. Ngāti Wairere historian Wiremu Puke told the council mana whenua has been waiting over 160 years to reconnect with Opoia Pā.
Many of our pā have disappeared under developments in the city for the last 160 years, and we don't have many of those old pā to take people to and share that history with them. I mean, it's a continual feeling of anguish for Ngāti Wairere.
The future of the site, which some at the meeting thought should be gifted back to mana whenua, will be considered by council next week. Russia says it's downed several Ukrainian drones during another night of attempted attacks on the capital and elsewhere. One drone was reportedly intercepted close to Moscow. It comes as the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, continues a 2-day visit to Kyiv, during which he announced a further package of aid for Ukraine worth more than $1 billion. Google is to make it mandatory for all political advertisements posted on its platforms, including YouTube, to prominently disclose whether they contain AI-generated content. The rule update will come into force in November. Here's the BBC's Julian Bedford.
Google has come under fire for misinformation on its platforms. It's decided to act after one of its subsidiaries reported seeing an increase in the use of artificial intelligence to conduct manipulative information campaigns. From November, a year out from what's likely to be a contentious US presidential election, campaign ads must prominently display a message if they contain synthetic content that inauthentically depicts real or realistic-looking people or events.
And Airbus says New Zealand is an ideal place for hydrogen-powered aviation. A consortium met in Wellington today to discuss what action is required to launch green hydrogen in the aviation sector. The panel involved Airbus, Air New Zealand, Christchurch Airport and the companies Fortescue, Hiringa Energy and Fabrum. Airbus is working on developing a liquid hydrogen-powered aircraft. Infrastructure project manager Jean-Christophe Auguet says New Zealand's short-distance domestic aircraft are an ideal candidate. That's the news.
This Saturday morning, Elton John's friend and songwriting partner, Bernie Taupin, who says in his memoir that he enjoyed a rock and roll excess as much as the next man. Well, maybe not as much as Elton, but he also collected rare books. Laura Donegan, the founder of the first New Zealand company to grow cells for lab-grown meat. And Richard Ford brings the curtain down on Frank Bascom. Ko Kim Hillaho. Join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Remaining showers about Northland clearing in the early evening. Otherwise mostly fine. However, a few areas of low cloud or fog early tomorrow. From Waipomo to Manawatu, also the Central High Country and Wairarapa. Mostly fine. Valley fog tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Scattered rain about Gisborne clearing overnight. Otherwise mainly fine until isolated showers from tomorrow afternoon. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, as well as Otago and Southland, mostly fine weather. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine, apart from a few showers lingering about Fiordland until tomorrow. And for Dekohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, the chance of a shower. It is 7 minutes past 6. I will have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā e ho. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A rare moment of consensus during what has been a very fractious election campaign. Labour, National and the Greens all pledging to build 1,000 state homes a year in Auckland if elected. But are the country's builders and community housing providers up to the task? And what difference will it make to the housing crisis? Housing reporter Emma Stanford finds out.
If elected, do you commit to continue to increase the state public housing stock in Tamaki Makaurau by building new stock at least at the current net build rate of 1,000 houses a year? Yes or no? Yes.
National Party Deputy Nicola Willis, Labour leader Chris Hipkins and co-leader of the Greens, Marama Davidson, all on board with a commitment to increase Auckland's stock of state houses at a debate in Auckland last night. The Salvation Army welcomes the cross-party commitment, but its Director of Social Housing, Greg Foster, says 1,000 houses a year is nowhere near enough.
The waiting list in Auckland's around 8,000 families. That has been going up and down each quarter over the last couple of years, but it's certainly on a trajectory of increasing. I think 1,000 is the minimum. We should be doing more, actually.
Doing the minimum would only have a small impact on the state housing waiting list.
But there's also hundreds of families in motels and private rentals. Like, for instance, we're renting hundreds of private sector homes now for transitional housing, where we put families who are in real emergencies. In order to move them out from those transitional housing and the motels, you've got to be building a lot more homes.
But is 1,000 homes a year even possible? Community Housing Aotearoa Chief Executive Paul Gilbert says it's a bit of a stretch as 800 homes are currently planned per annum.
But it's a very carefully chosen target by the community groups who have a really good grasp of what the situation is in terms of persistent unmet need in Auckland. And so whilst it's a little bit of a stretch, it's actually achievable.
Mr Gilbert says state housing is badly needed in Auckland.
We have more than 24,000 households. That's not people, that's actually families. More than 24,000 on the waiting list. So it's going to take us, after 30 years of neglect, a long time to catch up.
Malcolm Fleming is Chief Executive of the Certified Builders Association. He believes the sector could cope and would welcome the work.
In recent times, the demand and the level of inquiry has started to drop down more so than the rest of the country. So there is capacity in the system as they move through and complete homes that have been undertaken for the last 12 to 18 months. They would certainly welcome demand and production coming into the system.
Mr Fleming says plans would need to be firmed up in the next government's first term for the goal to be achieved.
Speaking of houses, there are fears 6-storey apartment blocks will shade homes and destroy Nelson's sunny reputation. A proposed change in planning rules to enable greater housing intensification has drawn opposition from some residents. A public meeting has been scheduled at short notice to allow residents to discuss the proposed changes. Samantha G has more.
Daylight robbery is the slogan of choice for Tim Bailey, who started the Facebook group Stop Plan 29.
That's what it is. It's basically they're stealing our sunlight.
And we all came to Nelson because it was the sunniest place in New Zealand, so mostly, and houses are sold on sunshine and aspect.
Plan Change 29 proposes 3 new residential zones. In the high-density zone, buildings of up to 6 storeys, 19.5 metres tall, can be built without resource consent if they meet the required conditions. Tim Bailey says he isn't opposed to intensification, he just doesn't agree with this approach.
I don't think it's the way forward. You don't hand the city over carte blanche to developers to look after, because developers do not build good stuff, really. They will build stuff that makes them the most money. And that's the issue here. I think if you want really good planning, you have to have good community input.
Fellow Nelson resident Steve Webster feels the same and is worried about the timeframe for feedback and the lack of engagement with the community.
We have 27 working days to get public submissions in. The documentation is a couple of thousand pages or so. There's no time in order to try and look at the positives in it. It's just trying to find the negatives in it so that we can stop those aspects before we destroy the city.
Nelson City Council Environmental Management Group Manager Mandy Bishop says the current planning rules are 2 decades old and need to change to cope with the city's growth.
Nelson hasn't got a lot of flat land to spread out on, so our main avenue for accommodating growth is intensification. So we've got intensification both within the city centre as well as some areas close to that or along public transport routes.
Nelson Tasman Housing Trust Director Carrie Mazzina says greater intensification is needed in the city, and the organisation supports the plan change.
Nelson continues to have a serious affordable housing problem, and frankly, anything that over time will help both community housing providers as well as private property developers deliver a greater intensification will help the community long term.
The Trust has over 100 people on its waitlist for housing and fields hundreds more inquiries each year. Its most recent survey shows 600 households across Nelson and Tasman are searching for an affordable place to live. Kendra Douglas of Community Action Nelson says there has been a clear need for housing intensification for some time.
It's been talked about as long as I can remember, in a way. The future development strategy of a number of years ago was very clear that overall there was a sense of we don't want to go out sprawling because we don't have the traffic infrastructure, we don't want to create greater congestion, but also people want to live in a city centre now.
She says the plan presents exciting opportunities for growth.
And it's up to us now as good citizens who are interested and committed to having a really livable city, a smart little city, where we increase the number of people that are living right in it.
The proposed changes are open for feedback until September 19, with a public meeting being held in Nelson tonight.
Samantha G reporting there. One of New Zealand's most successful and influential netball coaches, Robin Broughton, has died after a recent illness. She's best known as coach of the supremely successful Southern Sting from 1998 to 2007, winning a record 7 titles in 10 years. The side captured the hearts and minds of the Invercargill community and ignited a sense of Southern pride. Bridget Tunnicliffe reports.
That was the final ticker tape parade held in honour of the Southern Sting in 2007 after capturing their 7th and final title in the Old Domestic League. Former Silver Fern and Southern Sting player Donna Wilkins says Broughton was the driving force behind the success of the side.
Robbie was there for 10 years, for that whole 10 year of that Sting campaign, and look, she'll hate me saying it, but she was the main reason. She was the reason that got us all together, got us to play together, be as a team. We just went out there and did the job, and we did it because we respected our coach and we respected our teammates.
Rainga Bloxham played under Broughton in the Sting era. She's now coach at the Southern Steel and says Broughton had a big impact on her coaching style.
One of the things that I remember as a player is we'd go to training and you just absolutely could not drop that ball. If you dropped that ball in any warm-up, she would absolutely lose it at you because she just demanded that your basics be done really well. So I think those are the things now that as I'm coaching, I think, right, I need to make sure that my expectations are high.
Bloxham says the Southern Sting improved the standard of netball across the whole competition.
It did make other people think, right, how do we beat these Southerners? What do we do to, knock them off their perch? But again, that was her creativity and her innovation, and also her dedication to make sure that she was providing, her players with the edge to make sure that they were the best players that they could possibly be.
Broughton, who was also the Silver Ferns assistant coach in the early 2000s, attracted some of the biggest names to the south. Players like former Silver Ferns captain Adine Wilson, Bernice Mennie and the late Tanya Dalton became minor celebrities in Invercargill. Wilkins says the appeal of the team was bigger than netball.
I think at the time too, Invercargill did need a lift, and it wasn't just people that used to play netball or females. There were rugby players coming to the games. There was just huge mix of people that were supporting our sport, which was amazing.
Netball New Zealand is planning a tribute to the revered coach when the Silver Ferns host Australia in Invercargill next month.
It's 17 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Israeli scientists have made a breakthrough which might shed light on the mysterious first few days of human life just after conception. They've created a near-exact replica of a 14-day-old human embryo without using sperm, an egg or a womb. It could lead to new developments in preventing early miscarriage and new technologies for growing organs for transplant. Here's the BBC's health and science correspondent, James Gallagher.
Take a moment to look at your body and think how remarkable it is you started life as a single egg fertilised by a sperm. But the earliest steps on that journey, when we move from indistinct cells to something that's eventually recognisable on a baby scan, are both crucial and poorly understood. It's the time when miscarriage and birth defects often arise. But researching embryos is legally, ethically and technically fraught. So there's a rapidly developing field called embryo models. They start as stem cells, which could become any type of tissue in the body, and they're converted into the 4 types of cell you'd find in an early embryo, and then 120 of them are mixed. The report in the journal Nature shows they start off as a complete jumble, but as they grow, they organise themselves. The lead researcher, Professor Jacob Hanna, told me their model looked just like a 14-day-old embryo.
This does look like textbook, and the structures are there, and it looks really, really good. This is a stem cell-derived entity that has all the cell types, all the compartments in the right orientation, which hasn't been done before.
There were structures that would create the placenta to nourish the embryo, a component called the yolk sac, and even a cluster of cells that would, if this were a real embryo, go on to form a baby. Now, it isn't a real embryo, and it's not possible to put this in a womb and make a baby, but it is similar. It even released hormones that made a pregnancy test turn positive in the lab, and scientists consider reaching this stage a triumph. The ambition is to use these embryo models to perform science that would be impossible on real human embryos, with the aim of improving IVF rates, tackling infertility, discovering how our organs develop, testing whether medicines are safe to use during pregnancy, and just exploring the earliest moments of our lives.
At least 8 people have died and several remain missing across Greece, Turkey and Bulgaria as torrential rain and severe flooding batters southern Europe. The worst may not be over as Greece, which has seen particularly intense rainfall, is braced for more flooding. Meanwhile, new data from Europe that shows July and August was the hottest ever summer since records began in the 1940s. Here's CNN's Katie Polglass.
A road in the city of Volos, Greece, ripped apart by floodwaters. These cables a makeshift system, and the only way to carry this man across the chasm to safety. Hard and delicate work in this endless summer of climate emergencies in Greece. For the past day and night, torrential rain from Storm Daniel has fallen on Volos and the surrounding area. The impact on residents has been disastrous.
The roof fell in from the rain. It's a huge damage. They should help us. I have a family and kids. How are we going to sleep? Last night we slept here and there. It's unbelievable.
The flooding follows a devastating summer wildfire season which ravaged the same area. the barren ground unable to absorb the water when the flooding came. In northern Greece, meanwhile, wildfires killed nearly 24 people in recent weeks. Storm Daniel is now crawling slowly across Greece towards the southwest. As it enters the Mediterranean Sea, meteorologists fear it will pick up strength from the unusually high sea surface temperatures and develop into a medicane, a weather event with hurricane-like effects. Greece is not alone. Neighbouring Bulgaria and Istanbul in Turkey have also faced intense flooding. As wildfires and flooding impact parts of Europe, Typhoon Haiku made landfall Sunday in Taiwan before bringing heavy rain to southwestern China. And the Atlantic hurricane season is reaching its peak, with Tropical Storm Lee expected to intensify into an extremely dangerous hurricane by this weekend, after Idalia battered the US Gulf Coast a week ago.
We are getting some intense winds and rains, currently protected by a building. Trees are going down.
Events like this are becoming more extreme, part of a global trend according to a new report from Copernicus, the EU's climate change service. 2023 saw the hottest air and sea temperatures since records began in the 1940s, the report says, and they're clear that humans are to blame, with the deputy director warning that we will continue to see extreme weather events until we stop emitting greenhouse gases. In the meantime, the world continues to see more chaos and disruption from climate catastrophes.
A former Iranian athlete is facing charges in the US after being caught trying to cross the Atlantic in a vessel resembling a human-powered hamster wheel. Court papers filed in Florida say there was a 3-day standoff at sea between the man and the Coast Guard. The BBC's Wira Davis reports.
It's not the first time that Reza Baluchi has tried to cross the Atlantic Ocean in a device that closely resembles a giant, buoyant hamster wheel. Running furiously in the metal frame, kept on top of the water by a system of buoys and floats, the former professional cyclist was determined to reach the British Isles, more than 3,000 miles away. But physical barriers notwithstanding, Mr. Baluchi's timing wasn't ideal. After setting off from Florida, the 44-year-old self-styled adventurer was picked up by US Coast Guards 70 miles off the coast of Georgia, just as Hurricane Franklin flirted with the eastern seaboard. Mr. Baluchi was detained for being in charge of an unregistered, manifestly unsafe vessel, after initially trying to resist arrest, with court documents alleging he falsely claimed to have a bomb on board. Later, he said it was all for a noble cause.
My goal is raise money not just for homeless people, raise money for Coast Guard, raise money for police department, but raise money for fire department. There is a public service they do for safety, for help other people.
It might all sound rather eccentric, but in fact, the Guinness Book of World Records lists more than 30 different methods of crossing the Atlantic, from surfing on a sailboard, standing on top of an aircraft, and even sailing aboard an adapted Volkswagen Beetle car. While Mr. Baluchi's efforts may seem futile and bizarre, just like the hamster perpetually running in its wheel, he says he's determined not to give up on his dream.
Okay, some of your feedback now, and lots of it coming in on One New Zealand, which was got the lowest ratings for customer service around mobile phone services. Mike's got in touch and says, as is often the case with large companies, One's senior leadership are in denial. Paris needs to move on. One needs to dramatically re-engineer their customer processes to be customer-centric. And Mark says, P.S. Jason, just try ringing your own call centre for help. Another listener says, I'm with One New Zealand. They're terrible. The customer helpline is terrible. And this one in too. Please ask Jason Paris why I haven't had a response from One New Zealand about my increase in broadband charges from October, yet they're advertising new customers for $55 a month for ultra-fast broadband. I am currently paying over $80 a month and it's about to go up by $6. And this one too, before we move on, I was up until 3 weeks ago with Vodafone for many years. I paid for and got no internet service. Thank you for your feedback. Right, rock and roll's greatest survivors are back centre stage today. The Rolling Stones have released a track from their first album in nearly 20 years. Phil Vine from World Watch reports.
The Rolling Stones are back. And they're angry, or someone's angry at them. That's if their latest track is anything to go by. Their new album is called Hackney Diamonds, a slang term for broken glass at the scene of a robbery. An edgy reference for lead singer Mick Jagger, who's now seen 80 summers.
Don't want to be big-headed, but we wouldn't have put this album out if we hadn't really liked it. I mean, we didn't want to make just any record and put it out. So we wanted to make a record. Before we went in, we all said, we've got to make a record that we really love ourselves. I mean, other people may like it, other people may not. But we must say that we are quite pleased with it. I'm not saying we're big-headed about it, but we're pleased with it. We hope you all like it.
It's the Stones' first original material in 18 years. Reviewers excited to see the surnames Jagger/Richards on the song credits. The new tune comes 2 years after the death of drummer Charlie Watts, who's been replaced by Steve Jordan. Here's the redoubtable Keith Richards.
Ever since Charlie's gone, it's different. He's number 4. He's missing. He's up there. And thanks to Charlie Watts also, we have Steve Jordan, who was Charlie's recommendation for if anything should happen to him. Steve Jordan's your man. It would have been a lot harder without Charlie's blessing.
The album features a starry-eyed list of collaborators, including Lady Gaga and Stevie Wonder. The BBC's music correspondent, Mark Savage, says it's all happened very quickly.
They were playing concerts, festival-sized concerts, just last summer, and then they went straight into the studio, made this album in the space of a month, December last year, and here they are, releasing it, their 24th album, 61 years into their career.
Another surprise inclusion and a boon for the nostalgics is the former Stones bassist, Bill Wyman.
Yeah, pretty much. It's 30 years since Bill Wyman played with the band, and he's there on a song that also features Charlie Watts called Live by the Sword. So they said at the press conference today it's their original rhythm section back together again.
Question is, do the Stones still have what it takes?
Don't get angry with me.
And apart from angry, it's unlikely you'll hear a squeak from or about the new album till the official release date of October the 20th. The Stones have put the music and all reviews of it under a strict embargo.
All right, last thoughts before we go from a listener on violence in health services. I'm a registered nurse, work in mental health services. Violence in mental health is worse than emergency departments. I would ask, where is WorkSafe? Why do they not want to do their jobs? Says Rob from Greymouth. That is about all we have time for this evening. Now, the Late News team will keep you updated throughout the night. And remember, if you missed anything from the program, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi Pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. on the eve of the Rugby World Cup. First up is Live with Grant Nisbet in France, and Grant is Sky's lead commentator for the All Blacks matches. No pressure. Tune in for that one at 5 a.m. We'll catch you a little later in the day. Have a great evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, Maloilele. I'm Evie Ashton. A Whanganui-based budgeting advisor says the high cost of living is leading people into debt and buy now, pay later schemes. Sandy Fage was speaking after a Checkpoint study found shoppers were paying around 12% more for their groceries last month than a year before. North Shore emergency doctor Andrew Ewens says most ED staff have been either verbally or physically abused by people angry about long waiting times. The Australasian College for Emergency Medicines wants 24-hour security at all EDs. One person is in a serious condition after a 4-car crash this afternoon at Ortane on State Highway 2 in Hawke's Bay. And